Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashoda Nandana Vrajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravikachari Astutar Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Charya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravikacharya Astutar Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopana Shama Kun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So today we'll be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, chapter 24, text 27. It's a pro, so if Dravida Prabhu can.
Yeah, I just want to make sure Tyler has the right. You had the right one? 27.
I was trying to figure out that.
All right, I'm going to just wait a second until Prabhupada has his book set up. Chapter 24, text 27. Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. Sorry. Tasyanucharitam upadishtat vistarishyate yasya bhagavan swayam akala jagat guru narayano dvari gadapanid avatishtate vijatananu kampita video yenan gushtena pada dasakandharo yojanayutayutam digvijaya uchatitaha.
Thank you. Translation by His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Shukadev Goswami continued, My dear King, how shall I glorify the character of Bali Maharaj, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Master of the three worlds, who is most compassionate to his own devotee, stands with club in hand at Bali Maharaj's door. When Ravana, the powerful demon, came to gain victory over Bali Maharaj, Vamanadev kicked him a distance of 80,000 miles with his big toe. I shall explain the character and activities of Bali Maharaj later in the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Next one. Translation. Beneath the planet known as Sutala is another planet named Talatala, which is ruled by the Danava demon named Maya. Maya is known as the Acharya, or master, of all the Mayavis, who can invoke the powers of sorcery. For the benefit of the three worlds, Lord Shiva, who is known as Tripurari, once set fire to the three kingdoms of Maya, but later, being pleased with him, he returned his kingdom. Since that time, Maya Danava has been protected by Lord Shiva, and therefore he falsely thinks that he need not fear the Sudarshan Chakra of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 29. The planetary system below Talatala is known as Mahatala. It is the abode of many hooded snakes, descendants of Kardru, who are always very angry. The great snakes who are prominent are Kuhaka, Takshaka, Kaliya, and Sushena. The snakes in Mahatala are always disturbed by fear of Garuda, the carrier of Lord Vishnu. But although they are full of anxiety, some of them nevertheless sport with their wives, children, friends, and relatives. Purport. It is stated here that the snakes who live in the planetary system, known as Mahatala, are very powerful and have many hoods. They live with their wives and children and consider themselves very happy, although they are always full of anxiety because of Garuda, who comes there to destroy them. This is the way of material life. Even if one lives in the most abominable condition, he still thinks himself happy with his wife, children, friends, and relatives. We'll finish this chapter. Beneath Mahatala is a planetary system known as Rasatala, which is the abode of the demoniac sons of Diti and Danu. They are called Panis. Nivata, Kachavas, Kalayas, and Hiranya Puravasis, those living in Hiranya Pura. They are all enemies of the demigods, and they reside in holes like snakes. From birth they are extremely powerful and cruel, and although they are proud of their strength, they are always defeated by the Sudarshan Chakra of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who rules all the planetary systems. When a female messenger from Indra named Sarama chants a particular curse, the serpentine demons of Mahatala become very afraid of Indra. It is said that there was a great fight between the serpentine demons and Indra, the king of heaven. When the defeated demons met the female messenger Sarama, who was chanting a mantra, they became afraid, and therefore they are living in the planet called Rasatala. Beneath Rasatala is another planetary system known as Patala, or Nagaloka, where there are many demoniac serpents. The masters of Nagaloka, such as Shanka, Kulika, Mahashanka, Shweta, Dhananjaya, Dhritarashtra, Shankachuda, Kambala, Ashvatara, and Devadat. The chief among them is Vasuki. They are all extremely angry, and they have many, many hoods. Some snakes 5 hoods, some 7, some 10, others 100, and others 1,000. These hoods are bedecked with valuable gems, and the light emanating from the gems illuminates the entire planetary system of below Swarga. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 5th canto, 24th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled the subterranean heavenly planets. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaisnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitamtam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vrishabhanusita Devi Pranamami Hare Pre Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sundubh Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnabhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam karoti vachalam pangam langayati girim yad kripatam maham vande Shri Gurum Dinataharnam. Hare Krishna. So, recently I received a letter from the USIS, the immigration of, huh? Yeah. And so, it said I needed to take a test to see if I know the history of America, the government. And yesterday, Tyler and I, we were going over some questions, and I was thinking about this. So on July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence manifested. And so the citizenship test, it had questions about the government, the Constitution, the Congress. And there was a lot of these questions that I wasn't familiar with because I wasn't born in this country. And I was thinking, this education that, we should learn, it's kind of like you have to know the country before you can live there, right? But it's funny because what if you're not from here? These questions are difficult, but they give you materials to read. And so in the Declaration of Independence, it says everyone has a right to a life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I was reflecting on that. The soul by nature is Satchit Ananda. So you can see this. If there's an ant, you put your finger, it's going to go around. So that means that they want to live, they don't want to die. It's searching, it wants to live eternally. And it's full of knowledge. So wherever there's civilization, man has always wanted to understand things. And they say that man is a rational animal. We're different from animals. And rational means we have the ability to reason. We can search for answers. So there's this search for knowledge, right? Everywhere you go. The Greeks, the Romans, us, Russians, everyone. And then we're trying to find happiness, ananda, or bliss. We're trying to adjust material nature. If it's too hot, we turn on the AC. If it's too cold, we turn it off, right? But there's miseries that are forced upon us that we can't control. For instance, the climate, miseries caused by other living entities. We want to live peacefully, but a little spider might come and bite us. So we're always disturbed. Not only that, but there's miseries caused by the mind and the body. And I was looking at this Declaration of Independence, and it also said there are certain rights that we have, like the freedom of religion. And that means we can practice any religion, or we don't have to practice any religion. And when I read this, I was thinking, this is another form of atheism, right? Instead of trying to be dependent on God, we're trying to be independent of God. And so Srila Prabhupada, he says we should declare the United States of dependence, right? We depend on so many things. We depend on the sun, the moon. We depend on others for help. I was at a nursing home where I worked before. And a lot of these elderly people, you can see their unfortunate condition. Their families leaving them. They have no friends. Each of their friends are dropping like flies. And so they're all alone. And a lot of these residents, they always tell me, when I was this old, they would reminisce about the past. So they're always trying to look for that enjoyable pastime that they once had, right? but the body, it's always changing from boyhood to youth to old age. And so I asked this one lady, I said, have you thought about where you're going to go? You know, I was telling her about the next life. And she said, I want to go back to Cleveland. And I said, what's in Cleveland? And she said, oh, you know, my friends were there. And I told her, but your friends are not there anymore. And then she kind of looked sad, and I told her, but it's okay, you know, your friends, they moved on to another body. So I was just trying to explain to her transmigration of the soul. And after I explained to her that the soul is eternal, she felt a little relief, you know. And when I go on book distribution, I ask people, you know, are you a teacher? Are you a nurse? And they say, yeah. I told them I worked in hospice. You know, hospice is a place where right before, you know, they leave the body is some type of comfort or, you know, grieving and stuff like that. Palliative care, yeah. And so this lady asked me, why did you work in that field? So I told her, you know, going on that final journey can be very scary. You know, you have no friends, you have no family. So wouldn't it be nice to have someone there that's kind of guiding you, not only guiding you, but comforting you? And so this lady, I was telling her, you know, there's a lot more to life than and I was telling her that this life is a very short chapter in a very long book, like what Dravidu, Yeah, like Dravidu Prabhu says, it's a very short chapter in a very long book. And in the Constitution, it also mentioned the rule of law. That means that everyone must follow the law. Leaders, government, and no one is above the law. But you can see in today's times, everyone is trying to be independent. You know, they're trying to break as many laws as you can. And so there's man-made laws, but then there's also God's law. I was speaking to some gentleman yesterday at Balboa Park, and I asked them, what are you going to do about old age? And they said, oh, I'm not worried about that. And I asked him, what are you going to do about death? And he said, oh, I'm not worried about that. So I asked him, what are you worried about? So he said, well, I'm worried about my family members. So instead of finding out, is there a life after death? Is there, you know, what is the difference between this world and the next? You know, what type of body will I have? He was so concerned about his family. Just like in the purport, he was mentioning how even though these snakes, they're full of anxiety, they're scared of the Sudarsana chakra, they're still trying to live happily with their wife and children, friends, relatives. So I told him, you know, that's not very intelligent. I told him, you know, we're different from animals. So I told him you can actually make inquiries now, you can ask questions. So he said, no, I'm happy with where I'm at. And he had a cane, you know, and I can tell he was having difficulty walking, but still he was thinking he was happy. And I told him that we can't break God's law. We're forced to die, we're forced to grow old. And I told him we're also going to be forced to take birth again. And in this life, you may be awarded a very nice position in society, but in your next birth, according to your karma or activities, you may not have a fortunate situation. I was distributing books yesterday, and I asked this question: what are some of the important things that we should ask about life? And I had a lot of interesting answers, actually. One person said, how can I find happiness? So I said, that's a good question. And then another one told me, how can I get a better job? So this was, you know, always occupying his mind. You know, how do I accumulate wealth? How do I get a better condition, living condition? How do I get a bigger house, a bigger bank account? And I told them, what about questions like, who am I? What's the purpose of life? Why am I here? And then they looked at me like, you know, those are very important questions. So I told them, yes, these are important questions that we should ask. Any human being should ask these questions before they die. And in the modern educational systems, there are different departments of knowledge, but they don't tell you what is the difference between a living body and a dead body. What is the difference between matter and spirit, the soul and the body, or who is God? And just in another class, a few classes ago, someone mentioned, I think it was Dharma Setu Prabhu, if any professor mentions, the word soul or God, he can be removed from his position. And so, Srila Prabhupada, he said, intelligence means to know the difference between matter and spirit and who is the owner of both. And so the present educational system, they don't prepare ourselves for death, right? They teach us how to have a career, a job, and most of the people, they work at places they don't even like. So, and I was comparing this to a Gurukul. A Gurukul, they educate you first is that the purpose of life, right? Who am I? Who is God? What is my relationship with God? And in today's times, you can also see that there's a lot of riots in schools, students versus teachers. And there's some that are actually physically attacked. And when someone attacks you, it means that they basically lost all respect for you. So the students, they don't teach or they don't respect their teachers. Why? Because the teachers themselves, they're not symbols of morality. Someone may be highly educated, but they're still, you can say, drinking and smoking. They're using foul language, so they're not peaceful at all. And when the students see this, they want to rebel. And students are also destroying schools or campus properties, I remember when I was younger too, I had that rebellious nature, I want to hop over the fence and I want to try to take things that are not mine. So students, they disregard the rules of the teachers and the properties because they're not trained in morality or in good character. And the government, or you can say schools, they teach you that there is no purpose of life. Life is just made of chemicals, and the body it just happened by chance. And when I first heard this, I thought, how bogus is this, right? The soul is actually what's important, and the soul animates the body. But then there's no qualities in teachers, They don't have peace of mind. They don't know how to control their mind and senses. There's so much mental disturbances. And then if there's no good qualities, it leads to war all around the world. Because there's an atheistic education. They teach you there's no God and there's no soul. And I was thinking also in Gurukul, they educate you in austerity. And they teach you to be celibate until you're maybe 25 years old. Because they say by retaining semen, you have sharp memory and the finer tissues of the brain for retaining knowledge. Not only that, but your duration of life increases. So you're able to control the demands of the body, mind, belly, tongue, and genitals. But in modern education today, it's the opposite, right? When I was about to graduate high school, I remember my friends were talking about what's the best party school to go to. So they didn't want to learn, they wanted to just party. And so I was thinking, that's what's determining what school you go to, is what school provides the best parties. Because that's what they teach you, is to try to gratify your senses. There's no self-control. There's no austerity being performed. And I was distributing books yesterday, and a man asked me, "Why are you here?" And then he said, "We don't need another person to tell us what to do, how to live our life." So I told him, "Thank you." I was trying to control myself. So I told him, I use this example that if you see people walking, they're about to walk off of the roof, shouldn't you say something? Shouldn't you try to stop them? Or are you just going to say, do whatever you want and let him, fall or injure himself? So I told him I'm here to try to help people, with mental disturbances. And I asked him, what do you do? And he said, I'm retired. I said, what did you used to do? He said he designed the buildings in Balboa Park. Yeah. He said it's the same design, but he made it a little bit better. So he was looking at his work, So I told him, well, what do you think about death? And he said, oh, I'm too busy to think about that. And I asked him, how old are you? And he said, 70 years old. And I told him, sir, you had time to enjoy. It's time to think about life more seriously. And then that's when he put his hand, he said, don't talk to me about that. So I told him, okay. So, he was looking at the buildings, and I told him, what are your accomplishments? So he was telling me, I did this, I did that in my life. And I told him, what about your children? How are you going to save them from death? And he looked at me like, I know that my children are going to die, but I'm going to tell them not to worry about it. Try to live a good life. And I told him, you have to first understand what is good. And, we're always taught that we don't, engage in conversations like this, but he got a book at the end. And then before he walked away, he wanted to shake my hand. He said, thank you. I never have a conversation like this with anyone, someone that makes me think. So I told him, you're welcome. And then what he told me is, I meet a lot of people in the park that are very forceful, You have to believe this, believe that. But he said, when I spoke to you, I can tell you're very respectful and you're giving me an option like that. I told him, yeah, we're offering alternative to living. And so I told him we're also trying to help people develop good qualities like tolerance and compassion, kindness, things like that. And then he said, I really like you, young man. I told him you should get this book too, China and be happy. I said, okay. And then he said, does it cost anything? I said, people give what they can. He goes back to printing the same book. So he gave $10 for China and be happy. And what was the other book? Spiritual Yoga. I told him that this book has a lot of nice instructions, and I told him I think you'll really like it. So he took the book, he shook my hand, and he went on his way. And there was another lady yesterday. I called her over. The thing where I'm at distributing, it's a long distance, it's like the main road. So I have to yell sometimes, like, hey, excuse me. And so I caught this lady's attention, and she came over and she said, what's this? And I asked her, how's your mind treating you? And she said, oh. And she said, I'm having a lot of trouble. And I said, why? And then she said, a lot of my roommates, they're full of negativity. And so that affects my way of thinking, my consciousness. So I told them association is very important. And so I told her the best association is taking this book. So I offered the Bhagavad Gita, and I showed her that verse. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. And she couldn't stop looking at that verse, and I told her, this is called timeless wisdom. This Bhagavad Gita was spoken 5,000 years ago, but you can see how relevant it is in today's times. And so she really liked the book. And then she asked me, how much is this book? So I asked her, if you saw this at a bookstore, how much do you think a book like this would cost? And she said, anything between $40 to $60. I told her, you're close. I said, people give what they can. People give 10, 20. It goes back to helping us print the books. And so she gave a very nice donation. And then I gave her another gift, which is flowers, prasadam. And then she started crying, and she said, no one has ever been this kind. And I told her, helping people, it can actually change the world. And so she wanted to give me a hug, so I just folded my hands like that. And then so she said, thank you so much, you made my day. And I said, thank you for taking the time to speak to me. I told her not a lot of people actually come to this table. And so people can appreciate what we're trying to do in the world. And education means training first-class men. What is the goal of life? How can I be eternally happy? Not this temporary material happiness. Human life is different from animal life. And when I tell people this, they start thinking, you know. And I told my dog, they don't ask questions, you know. They just accept, just like, you know, there's a lot of crows that are on the electric lines, whatever it's called. And one of their legs is like, you know, it's missing. But they still learn to, you know, fly and take food, things like that. So they just deal with it. Whereas human beings, we can ask questions, you know, why am I suffering? What is the solution? So we should use this human form of life to develop knowledge of who we are and how to get back to the kingdom of God with Krishna. And one of the easiest way is chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Human life is not meant for polishing animalistic functions like eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. I was speaking to some young man yesterday, and I told her, what do you like to do? And he said, I like to play video games. I said, okay, what else? And so I like to go to restaurants. I said, okay, what else? And so I like to meet new people. I said, what else? And so I like to sleep. I said, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, you know, you just confirmed this. So I told him, you know, there's a higher purpose, you know. So I showed him the book, Science of Self-Realization. I told him this book was a book that changed my life. I think it'll help you too, to understand there's a higher purpose. So he read it, and then he said, you know, I think I'll give this book a chance. And I said, that's all it needs. You just need to give this book a chance, you know. It won't let you down. So he asked me how much, and I told him most people give anything between $5 to $10. So he gave $10, and then I gave him another small book. And then he liked the cover of Easy Journey to Other Planets. So I gave him that book. I gave him a flower, and then he went on his way. And there was this one lady, I said, what's the purpose of life? And she said, to enjoy. I said, to enjoy what? And then I told her, you know, your enjoyment is going to have to come to an end. You know, you're going to grow old, and then you're going to die, so what kind of happiness is that? And then she said, well, I'm going to try to live as long as I can, enjoying, you know. So she was talking about sense pleasure. So I told her that there's different types of bodies. You know, there's Christian bodies, Hindu bodies, big bodies, small bodies, human bodies, animal bodies. And I told him, if you want to just enjoy, there's pigeons. You know? Why take birth as a human being? You know, you can take birth as a rabbit or a pigeon, and they can enjoy, you know, 10 times. And then I met another person. I said, what do you like to do? And she said, I like to sleep. So I said, you know, there's polar bears that hibernate for 6 months, you know. And so there's so many people that don't know how to utilize this human form of life. And I spoke to another man yesterday. He said, is this Hinduism? Is this Buddhism? And I said, no, this is for everybody. And then he said, can you explain? So I told him that it wasn't too long of a conversation, but I told him that the body is different from the soul, and the body is changing. And I told him sometimes faith can also change, like a Muslim to a Christian to a Muslim, Muslim to Hindu, like that. So I told him, but that real religion means to serve God, and all scriptures, they talk about that, to serve God, to love God. So I told him this is Sanatan Dharma, and I told him eternal religion. So I told him God has many names, and you can worship God according to, you know, whatever faith you want to practice. So he asked me, why is there different religions? So I try to answer this to the best of my ability. I told him, according to time, place, and circumstance, a person has to preach accordingly, you know. So I told him, Lord Jesus Christ, he had to preach, thou shalt not kill. So I told him, what does that mean? So I told him he was preaching to killers. Right? You wouldn't say that to a group like you guys. I wouldn't say, thou shalt not kill, you know, because I know you guys are, you guys understand that. And I told him the Prophet Muhammad, he said, you don't sleep with your mother. So I told him these are the type of people that, the preacher had to preach accordingly. And I told him there's also different grades, like, someone that can only understand 2 + 2, they can't understand algebra or calculus. And I told him, so the different religions is based off of, your understanding of God. But the person that's teaching 2 + 2, that's not all he knows, he knows more. So I told him similarly, Jesus Christ, he also knew more. He knew who God was, In the Bible it says that he sits at the right hand of God, right side of God. So he knows how God looks like, But how can he preach these higher topics if they couldn't understand killing was, bad? So I was trying to explain something like this to him. He said, that makes sense. But I told him, but real religion means to love God, to follow his laws, and to try to invite people also. And also told him the example of the sun, It's not an American sun or a Hindu sun or a Asian sun. The sun is sun. So I told him God is God. God doesn't belong to a particular nation or creed. And I told him the reason why people make distinctions is because they're on a bodily platform. I told him, some people are thinking I'm American, I'm Christian, like this. And so I told him spiritual purity means to understand our relationship with God and to develop that serving attitude towards him. And I told him we must serve someone. So I was explaining to him this. And they said, that makes sense. So I told him, yeah, people are serving their mind and their body, so why not serve God, who can fulfill all of our desires? And when the U.S. government was formed, they said, in God we trust. So that means they believed in God, however it was 300 years ago or whatever. But now, people don't want to believe in God. It's the opposite. And we're turning godless. And because in education, they teach you don't have to worship God. Just get yourself a good education, get a good job, and you can get anything you want. And formerly people, if they didn't go to church or they didn't go to the temple, they knew or they felt like there was going to be a lot of misfortune that was going to happen. But now there's this false propaganda that, if you get sick, you can just go to a hospital. If you lose your job, you can just go back to school, get a newer job, things like that. So they're not teaching dependence on God. And you can't be happy without God. That's a fact. And I told the same old man, I said, you can't be happy when your body's falling apart, So he said, that's right. So I told him, these books, they're meant to help you understand what is real happiness, transcendental or spiritual happiness. And it says that as soon as one takes birth, he's sure to die. I asked people this question. I said, what's the cause of death? And they tell me, disease, this and that. And I told them, no. I said, birth. And I told them as soon as a person takes birth, he's dying at every moment. And I can see their faces thinking, that's true, right? When you take birth, you have to die. And so I like to tell people these different, you can say information. So I'll conclude here. In the purport, he said, even if one lives in the most abominable condition, he still thinks himself happy with his wife, children, friends, and family. And you can see that everywhere you go, And they depend on their children, their wife, or friends for, you can say, momentary or temporary happiness. And even when someone is out on the streets, he's thinking I have a good life. I'm free to do whatever I want. But actually, he depends on others for shelter and for food, things like that. In the 6th canto, it says that even though the Supreme Personality of Godhead is endowed with all possessions and is self-sufficient, he depends on his devotees. So what does this mean? He depends on his devotee for some particular work. Just like when Krishna was a little child, Mother Yashoda was feeding him. So Krishna was requesting his devotee for some food. And although he wasn't really hungry, he liked that rasa with, And it says that he also tells his devotees in dreams that his temple or his gardens are now old and he cannot enjoy them. Thus he requests the devotee to repair them. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to take care of Krishna's temple so he can enjoy. We're taking care of his property, even though it's transcendental, but we should try to make this a nice place for Krishna. And sometimes he is buried in the earth as if unable to come out himself, but he requests his devotee to rescue him. Like how the six acharyas or the Goswamis, they had to try to excavate the temples and try to find the deities. And sometimes he requests his devotees to preach his glories all over the world, although he alone is competent to perform this task. And so that's our, you can say, debt to Srila Prabhupada. We can try to go out, try to invite people to the temple, give them books, give them prasadam, things like that. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, he told Arjun, Nimitta matram bhava savyachach. And it says, just be an instrument in this fight. So Krishna, he's competent to win the battle of Kurukshetra, but nonetheless, he induces devotee Arjun to fight and become the cause of victory. He wants to glorify his devotees. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was competent to spread his name and glories all over the world, but still he depended upon his devotee to do this work. And who was that devotee? Srila Prabhupada, right? So yeah, so we can try to help Krishna in any way we can. We can try to help Srila Prabhupada in any way we can. And that's all I have. Wish me luck on my citizenship test. So yeah, thank you. Hare Krishna. Yeah, I'm going to be taking that. Yeah. Oh man. So yeah, it also asked me. It was asking me questions like, what is an amendment? Do you guys know what an amendment is? What's an amendment?
Well, probably from the amendment of the Constitution.
So yeah.
Something additional.
Yeah, to add or an addition to the Constitution. And I was thinking, anyway, so I have a lot of studying to do, and although it's material or, things like that, I have to do it so I can travel with Maharaj and I can visit other temples abroad. Tyler?
You have a microphone? Did someone give you one? Okay, good. Just want to make sure. I'd like to study with you for that exam. It's harkening back to my college days. It's very nice.
Yeah, Tyler's very good at answering. He answered all of them correctly.
Yeah, especially if I could see the options, it'd be better. But so thank you everyone for being here. We had a festival last night. It's very nice. I know we're all kind of lagging a little bit, so thank you for all of us who are here. Maybe I'm just talking for myself. It was hard getting up today, but horrible. Very nice Sankirtan stories. Very good. And also, I remember the Christian preacher, they talk to their sermon once a week on Sunday, and if they imbibe the week, they're if they take the current happenings and they can infuse their talk with that. It's very nice, and it's good that you talk about relevant things, that happened to you during the last time you spoke. So it's good. I had a general question. It's kind of more of an idea. Maybe we can try to figure this out, because in the Christian Bible, they're cast into the snake form, as a punishment. You will crawl on you'll slither, you won't have arms and legs, you'll have to fight for all your food. But we constantly see that form coming up in all these different places, the snake. And we even learn that Balaram expands, is Anantashesh, all these hoods of snakes. So it seems like the snake is a good form. It's also not a great form. There, and then in that first subterranean heavenly planet, they have jewels that illuminate the darkness. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that it's the snake that's a form. And Shiva has a snake around him. I don't know. To me, my tradition was it's a ghastly form. That's punishment. My brother's really afraid of snakes. So, and I was afraid of spiders. So if there was a spider, he took care of it. If there was a snake, I took care of it. So why do we see snakes so much? Why are snakes so prevalent? And how are they both benevolent and not so benevolent in our tradition?
So I just remember Srila Prabhupada, he says that snakes are envious, you know. So people can take birth as snakes if they're very envious. But I haven't really read the Bible, so I don't know what you're talking. So maybe someone can shed some light on this.
Well, this may not be in Shastra, but I would say, like, there are snakes, and then there are snakes. In other words, while it's true, I just read one of my favorite pastimes, the Kaliya, you know, where Krishna chastises Kaliya. And his wives first, you know, plead for his life, you know. And because he's about to expire from all of the beating that he'd get, you know. And then he also has some prayers, much shorter, you know. But his appeal was, because they're both appealing to be delivered, that they, you know, because the wives say, oh, he's all we have, and Kali is appeal. So his appeal was on this basis that, you know, I'm born as a snake, so naturally I'm envious, you know. So it's like, he didn't say this, but don't blame me. But I mean, it's like that, you know, that's the appeal to the intrinsic or inherent nature of my birth, and therefore that's why I am. But in other words, no hard feelings. You know, it's just that whenever I see someone come into my abode, I bite them. You know, just reflexively. But when it comes to Krishna, Ananta Shesha Naga, we were just studying Balaram, and he also takes that form as because it's functional. In other words, he has this form that and Garbhodakshay Vishnu can lie on him, you know, that lying on his neck. And then he has all the hoods. Oh, he can hold up the universes, you know. Yes, generally speaking, ordinary snakes, like, as you may know, there's some pastimes where Prabhupada was in Mayapur, and the snake appeared, a cobra, you know, in his bathroom. So the devotees, you know, it's a very serious thing. And I don't know if they eventually found that snake or anything, but Prabhupada was surprised when a snake appeared, I think in the Gaudiya Math or something, and Bhakti said, kill him. He says, kill him. Oh, here's this sadhu, you know, and I thought it was, but for the snake, because he's inherently dangerous and poisonous and envious, therefore you can kill a poisonous snake. And there's even a pastime that you may know this one, but I don't know if anyone's ever heard this. There's this pastime many years ago, 30 years ago at least, in Mayapur, and there was this a snake had appeared in the ashram. It wasn't festival time, but it was there. You know, if you go to Mayapur now, every time I went in the last few years, it's amazing how much it's been built up. Well, here they had maybe the Lotus building and maybe the Long building. This was the second building they built, you know, but. Jayabhataka Maharaj was there, and he went after the snake. He had a gun. He had a shotgun, and he's out in the field, you know, with all these tall grasses, and the devotees are all on top of the building and watching. They see the snake moving in the grass, big cobra, you know, and they're calling out to Maharaj, but they're so far away that he's not hearing. So he's hunting with his rifle, you know, and at the last minute, the cobra comes up over his head, you know. And he turns around and blasts the cobra with it. It's some out of a movie or something, you know. So generally speaking, material snakes, especially if they're poisonous type, you know, I never knew many snakes, but there's also the garden snakes, which are just, you know, they just cultivate the land, don't hurt the garden snakes. But the ones who are poisonous, they're by nature, you know, they'll just bite for any reason. In other words, there's no you're not hurting them or anything, but they're just envious. So therefore, such a species can be killed. I think this is true for the scorpions too. The scorpions tend to sting just by nature. Maybe Vaikuntha has something there.
One other footnote on that story with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. That doubt was there for some time, and then Prabhupada read a verse in the Bhagavatam where it basically indicated that that's the proper treatment, and then he was kind of feeling, you know.
So that's the idea, is that there's this inherent nature in material snakes, especially if they're poisonous, that that's their nature. They'll just bite, just like a dog will bark, if it comes by. Well, okay, that's kind of harmless, but that's Prabhupada uses that also for no reason at all. They'll just bark at you, So for no reason at all, the snakes will bite you. Since it's so dangerous, they can be killed. But we also have sacred snakes, Sheshanaga.
I just also heard about snakes, that some animals can be trained if you give them food and a place to sleep. But for the snakes, if you give them a place to sleep and food, they're still going to bite you, even if you continue feeding them. They're so envious.
I think Prabhupada also compared humans to snakes, where snakes you can charm them, but humans, more dangerous than snakes. Yes, Ram Vilas Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So this is like a general question in this context of the flowing of Bhagavatam. So now the setting is Parikshit Maharaj is he got the curse and he's about to leave his body in 7 days. And Sukadeva Goswami is speaking about what are the duty of any person who are in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's general question. Now, about this Atala, Sutala, Talatala, Mahatala, Satala, all these Patala Lokas and this knowledge of how many planetary systems are there, how is it relevant to Parikshit Maharaj, and why Sukadeva Goswami is speaking about this description of these planetary systems?
I think in the beginning, Parikshit Maharaj, he asked a question, right? It was I think it was about the different planets or the different planetary systems. So Shukadev had to explain, one by one, each planet, what are their functions, who lives there, who are the inhabitants there. So I think it's just to clear up, but it's going to be leading up towards, the heavenly planets and the hellish planets. That's true.
While it's true that in certain parts you read the chapters and it's just what's the distance, so many yojanas and this and that, but when you read it through, you see, now we come to Sutala. Oh, there's Bali Maharaj. You get a chance to do. And then next we're going to have the glories of Ananta Shesha, because he's also down there holding everything up. So you get to read about him. Then there's the hellish planets, and that leads to the glories of the holy name. Because now you've, because he's not just hearing, he's not just taking notes for some exam about, the length of he's saying, these people are suffering so much, how can they be saved? And the story by Prayaschitta, but that's a test. No, but you may atone for the sin, but you're not going to get rid of the desire to perform the sins. So then comes the story of Ajamil and so it always comes around to Bhakti in Bhagavatam, for sure.
Balarama?
Yeah, as was mentioned in previous classes, that this is, I think Vijay Prabhu was emphasizing this some time ago. He was saying that the creation of the hellish planets, of the heavenly planets, and all this is just all of Krishna's creation, and it's glorifying Krishna because, it's such an amazing creation. And then also, of course, the Bhagavatam is spoken by Shukadeva Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj, but it's also for us, and that we are gradually making our way up toward the 10th canto, which all these cantos are training us to understand Krishna in the proper context, that, he's the one who created all of this. So it's not just, like, for example, Prabhupada says about Rasa Leela. When you read Rasa Leela, you don't think, Krishna's just some mundane boy and Radharani's some mundane girl, and this is just love affairs, right, of the mundane world. But it's transcendental. So all the cantos are helping with that also. So. And as is mentioned in the Bhagavatam, that everything actually should be seen in relation to Krishna. What to speak of the whole Bhagavatam. It's all supposed to be seen in relation to Krishna. But somebody said, well, why are we discussing the planets? One time Prabhupada was talking with someone, and then they said, actually Prabhupada was talking about Maya. And then one disciple said, I don't know why, but disciples say so many things, but he said, Prabhupada, can we talk about Krishna now? And then Prabhupada said, no, we're talking about Maya. So, anyways.
Just on that same point, just remember a few chapters ago, there was all the inhabitants of the different planets, along with the leaders of those planets, were worshiping different incarnations of the Lord and different, personalities, avatars of the Lord, and the prayers that they were offering, and how they worshiped them according to their particular situation in the universe and their life. So it's like everybody's pointing out, it always ties back in,
Comment on that is that when I was working on the Bhagavatam with Gopi Puranadhana Prabhu and Vrinadhana Maharaj, one of the things I learned is that, because there's 18 Puranas, and this is the last, Bhagavatam is the last one of the ultimate book, of course, but that there are certain rules about what a Purana has to contain in order to be recognized as a Purana, and one of them is the genealogy, description of the descendants. You'll find that a lot of that come in the 8th canto. You'll find a whole, and the other is a description of the universe. So that's one of the things that makes the Bhagavad Purana, it has to have that. But they weave in so much about, the great devotees there. As you say, the residents of Jamadweep, they're offering prayers, wonderful prayers. So you find that. So that's another reason that you find that, it's technical. But interestingly enough, in the production of the Bhagavatam, again, at one point, Prabhupada, he gave over this, a lot of the translation and the calculations to his crew. By that time, this is 75, he had some very competent Sanskrit department led by Prajimna Prabhu, who traveled with Prabhupada, but we had others in this department. And Jayadvaita Maharaj and Harikesh Swami, they spent hours, working on things in consultation with the Sanskrit and what are the figures and the numbers and all these things to make it come out right. So that you should know that, But also there's a factor, and one final thing is that in the production of 5th canto, that was part of the marathon. So you can imagine, late nights, with the calculator trying to figure all this stuff out. And some mistakes came in. And that's my job to come at this point to look into, like the Ganges is coming down, and comes into the east. You remember? And then, or I think it's the west. But then it said it comes down, and comes into the west. It says, how could they both be the west? And we looked it up, and it said, one should be east. So these little things are going on to try to refine it so that it's just exactly what it's supposed to be.
You cleared up a really nice inquiry I had. That was a wonderful question. And you just made me think, so for the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita, what text did Prabhupada have? Because his is authoritative, so we did. What was he, for the shlokas, what was he looking at to then,
There's an edition of the Bhagavatam that he would travel with 6 or 8 commentaries. And you have to understand, when you get just to the Sanskrit letters and everything, it's much more compact. The English, if you look at the synonyms, one word, you have a whole thing. So it was very compact, but he traveled with that. I can look it up and find out exactly what edition it is. But you have commentaries by Madhvacharya in there, and Vishwanath Chakrabarti. In fact, if you're interested, that electronically there is available a version of the Bhagavatam with Vishwanath Chakrabarti's commentary with all the chapters, which Prabhupada used, And then on the 10th canto, this is the efforts of Devamrita Maharaj to put this together, because he's also part of the BBT trustees now, for the last 5, 6, 7 years. For the 10th canto, you have not only Vishwanath Chakrabarti, but also Sanatana Goswami and Jiva Goswami. So it's very illuminating. And then you can see oftentimes what Prabhupada brought in from Vishwanath, you can see like that if you're interested. So Prabhupada had all of that, and he was referring to it, and his editors also had it when they were working on it with him. So tremendous effort.
Okay. Anyone from Zoom?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I have a question.
Yes.
So, in the verse 5:24:30, it says that in Rashatala planet, Kaliya is staying. So, I hear that Kaliya is staying with Krishna in spiritual world. So, how do you explain that?
Dravida Prabhu can explain.
Went back to Fiji. You mean Kali is in the spiritual world because he was purified?
Yeah, that's what I heard in some class. I don't remember which class.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Bhagavatam was spoken 5,000 years ago, so at this point he may be back in the spiritual world. Because Kali didn't die.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he didn't die at that point. I don't know where, you know, it says. But the time differences in the passages are not mentioned here exactly what's going, you know. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But we can do more research on it, and you just write to me about it, and we can try to do some research on that. I have people I consult and find it.
Thank you, Prabhu, for your mercy. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.